Good evening, everybody. Before we get the meeting underway, I'll ask everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices. And I'll call this meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. by recognizing traditional keepers of this land and specifically our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation with a formal territorial acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the municipality of Brighton is located on the Mississauga Anishinaabe territory and is the traditional territory of the Mississauga. The Council of the Municipality of Brighton respectfully acknowledges that the Mississauga Nations are the collective stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. With that, we'll move into the approval of the agenda with a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The Council approved the June 5th, 2023 Council agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. We'll advise that Councillor Wright has suggested that she may not be able to make it, but if she can, she will get here as soon as she is able. Members of Council, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. More of a perceived conflict more than an actual one regarding Ms. White's contract. I have a personal relationship with Ms. White, but no functional business relationship.
Thank you for that. Anything else from anyone else? Are there any announcements this evening? I have a few. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I'll just provide one that you probably will too, but the Friends Presqu'île AGM was on the weekend and it was a great event and great weather and boy, they've got a lot going on down there and a lot of concerns with trees and shorelines and things like that, but we heard a lot of information about Presqu'île and where they're heading. And volunteerism is the biggest challenge for every group right now and Presqu'île as well. So as far as, and also we also heard about getting labor, getting help to run the park is also a major concern, as it is with a lot of businesses right now too. So anyhow, it was a great event and I thank them for having us.
Thank you for that. That strikes that one off my list.
Yeah.
Thank you. Also, the Trent Valley Quilters Guild had a massive show at the King Edward Park Arena. I think it used to be an annual thing, and they were COVID delayed, and I think this is the first one back after COVID, right? Yeah. What artistry? It's incredible what goes into those quilts and the labor. It's gorgeous stuff, and glad to have them back. And their Brighton's First Pride event was on Sunday. Trinity St. Andrews had their Affirm and Equity Pride event, and there will be the pop-up Pride event coming up on this Sunday at 1 o'clock, also at Memorial Park, June 11th at 1 o'clock. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. Anyone else? Moving into the adoption of the minutes, moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that Council adopt the May 15th, 2023 Council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. We have no statutory public meeting this evening, which brings us to delegations and presentations. Council will hear 3 presentations this evening. Presenters have 15 minutes to provide Council with their information. It is noted that language, content, and conduct must remain respectful at all times. Council will be provided with an opportunity to ask questions of clarification from the presentation representatives based on the information that they have presented. Council is reminded that this is not an opportunity to engage in debate with the presenters nor advance a public policy position. Presenters are reminded that Council does not make decisions during the presentation portion of tonight's meeting. Our first presentation comes from Blair Labelle of the Perry Group with regard to the IT Master Plan. Mr. Labelle.
Good evening. Just share my screen here. Everyone can see that okay?
No, we cannot.
Oh. Okay, the screen is shared here. Interesting. Give me 1 second here. Is that better?
It is not. Are we able to? Do we have the presentation? Give us a second, Blair. We're going to try to pull up your presentation and you'll have to do the next slide, please thing.
No problem. That technology stuff, I swear.
Well, will the master plan address these kinds of issues? I'm just asking for a friend, I guess.
Okay.
There it is. It's there somewhere. There it is.
All right. Great. Good evening, counselors, staff, and those in attendance. I'm very pleased to be here to provide you with a high level of the ITMP, Brighton's first IT strategy. Our full report is attached to the evening's agenda. There are some notations that have been made on the slides to point you in the appropriate direction. Next slide, please. So the keys for the ITMP really center around better orchestration of IT corporately, ensuring that Brighton is making the best decisions it can for its citizens and staff. This includes more centralization of decision-making and oversight with respect to investments, budget, and partnerships. This plan also introduces several building blocks that should be established to make operations and decision-making easier over time. It addresses risks that we feel should be mitigated and highlights opportunity areas where we feel the municipality should focus its time and money. Next slide, please. The ITMP programs of work were developed throughout our engagement, the big buckets, so governance, leadership and training, infrastructure and operations, as well as service transformation and business solutions. We reviewed corporate artifacts, interviewed departments and surveyed staff, met with the external service provider and held a workshop to identify and prioritize what is a 5-year roadmap. We feel these areas represent the big buckets of work, each containing various individual projects which have been prioritized based on the requirements. Next slide, please. Prior to the arrival of the new IT manager, the director of finance and admin worked with the managed service provider to keep the municipality functioning as a solid utility. So keeping the lights on, keeping services running. Certainly more than a valiant effort on her part, and the organization is certainly in better shape as a result. That said, a model like this for an organization your size is likely not sustainable over time. With the IT manager now on board, the opportunity really is to leverage his skill sets and experience to have, and in some cases, force more corporate conversations around technology, create better partnerships with departments, and ensure that the business units are all moving in lockstep toward better technology information planning tied to corporate strategy. Next slide. So we introduced this slide really as a conceptual model only. This is from our vantage point. We would have been remiss not to mention it. And certainly there's a lot of considerations that need to take place prior to shifting an organization around. But Brighton is getting to a point where an organizational model that merges IT, communications, HR, and finance could be considered. We've seen this consolidation happen in municipalities your size, and it has strengthened sort of internal services. It creates better consolidation of projects, It also creates standards upon which the services are delivered, regardless of really who's delivering it. The other point I'd make on this slide is around student co-op positions. It's a great way to introduce savvy, sort of up-and-coming professionals into your organization. I know the communications area does some of that. These are perfect, perfect positions to tie to a service desk or to support IT operations in general. Next slide, please. So we use a skills and capacity assessment. The left image there is your current state, and the right, we believe, is your desired future state. Basically, this assessment breaks down those various components that need to be in place in a municipal IT shop. The suggestion really is to leverage the IT manager's role to fill in a number of strategic gaps that can be seen as red on the current state. So strategy and planning, policy and procedure development, asset management, business solution modernization, as well as vendor management. To date, the IT manager has largely been sort of working in the area of providing service desk responsibilities and also developing key relationships throughout the organization. We feel this is an optimal way to begin a journey in Brighton for sure. But moving forward, the hope is that the IT manager will be able to fill these gaps and take over these responsibilities. Even with this, the municipality will still require support from external service providers as well as cloud vendors. That's simply the reality today in municipal technology. And in order to deliver, you need to have those partnerships in place. Having an IT manager or a single point of contact within the municipality will go a long way in ensuring those are value for money. Next slide, please. So this is the governance group we're recommending with respect to technology. So corporate governance. The overall intent is really to manage technology through a corporate lens, ensuring that the funding is in place, ensuring that the investments are prioritized. There's always going to be more technology work than you can do. So this prioritization is critical for Brighton and municipalities in general to decide on those projects that will return the greatest return on investment. I'm preaching to the choir here a bit, I know, but governance is a discipline and it takes time to mature. So what's important initially, I think, with this model is that senior leaders make the time to have the conversations about technology, discuss how it's managed, funded, and monitored. And these will lead to more decision-making. The more decision-making that's done makes it easier down the road. As part of this strategy, we provided mandates, terms of reference, and other sort of artifacts that will help get this group off the ground. Again, initially, what's important is meeting once a month to talk about technology and trying to remove barriers. Next slide, please. So we do a bit of an investment in funding assessment, and we do some benchmarking with comparator municipalities. Brighton did rank fairly low in terms of its overall technology spend. The caveat here really is that currently technology budget is distributed amongst the business units. So it is challenging at times to get to that single cost. So consolidation or centralization of this budget is a recommendation of ours. That will certainly make it easier to track and monitor. Nearly half of the existing budget is what is paying for the managed service provider, which is Zycom ITI. And as we said previously, it'll be vitally important that that the IT manager and the governance group work to define the roles and responsibilities between the IT manager in-house and the external service provider, just to ensure that full value of money is being received. This relationship is going to be key throughout the execution of the plan. Next slide, please. Similar to governance, vendor management is now a required discipline for municipalities. So many of our vendors are now structured around cloud services and external partners and contractors. It's vital that rigorous attention is paid right from the contracting part all the way through performance management. There are also further opportunities to deliver through shared services. So we're seeing many lower tier municipalities working together and alongside their upper tier partners to stretch funding, share resources, and develop similar approaches to technology, which makes it easier for them to work together in the future. Should note here, the library is also an ideal partner, I think, to help fund and utilize some of the experience that Brighton currently has on staff. Next slide, please. Cybersecurity today is mission critical. We spend a fair bit of time of this on the strategy. Municipalities have become a direct target for cyber attacks, and I'm likely seeing it in the news quite often. More needs to be done to bolster the corporate posture in Brighton and municipalities in general, and also to ensure that the investments are covering off the highest risk areas. Your managed service provider is certainly a key partner in this. If not a broker to others that can help you, you do need external help on this to ensure that you're covered off adequately. Cyber insurance is one thing for sure, and you do have that in place, which is excellent. It's becoming more challenging to get insurance these days because of the number of attacks. Business continuity and disaster recovery is a portion of this. It's been exponentially growing. It's important to uncover and document really the business context behind services to understand which are most critical. In the event of a disaster, there's a plan and a prioritized sequence to essentially reestablish some of these services that are critical. The last piece here, cloud service or the cloud strategy, goes hand in hand with security. Everyone is moving to the cloud, including Brighton. The one comment we would make, and we spend some time in the report certainly on that, is to ensure that there is adequate insight into the bandwidth utilization and capabilities to support cloud use. We know satellite facilities, some of the satellite facilities have difficulty connecting to the internet, maintaining that connection. And so it's sort of a balanced approach over the next 5 years, is deciding when to move to cloud and ensuring that there is sufficient infrastructure there to support it. Next slide, please. So these are the key ITMP projects that we have listed. We feel the ones noted here in red are absolutely critical to get right. There's approximately 50 projects recommended through the strategy, and these were assessed over the course of our engagement. That said, it's important to have conversations around this through the governance group. This is a moment in time, a bit biased. I think it's an excellent roadmap, but it does need to be monitored, and that's what ITGG is there for. A number of these projects focus on developing policies, standards, service reviews, the really foundational rudiments that will support continuous improvement to make it easier to adjust priorities when you need to. Much of this work in the ITMP really is focused on making life easier for citizens, so more digital services, better access to information. This is also true of staff. The ideal scenario really is to leverage technology and automation to reduce the need for human intervention. So where it makes sense, use computers where it makes sense, essentially. Automation can reduce the administrative burden and build more capacity for staff to tackle more meaningful work. Next slide, please. And that's all I had for you at this point, Council. Thanks for your time and attention. I'm certainly happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Labelle. I will open the floor to Council for questions of clarification. Councillor Paredes.
Through the chair, thank you to Mr. Labelle. Looking at your proposed organization chart, I'm a little puzzled. You talk about Director of Corporate Services, and you state in there could require a net new Director of Corporate Services. I was kind of the view that our current Director of Finance, Director Whitfield, who also oversees IT now, would simply undergo a change of title and inherit a couple of other departments. Is that not your view? And is there a particular reason why you have a differing view?
So through your worship, this is really just a conceptual model, and it's based on our experience working with municipalities of similar size and scale. It's not to suggest you need a new director role. Certainly I've worked in municipalities for decades now and understand the difficulty in funding net new positions. What we've seen in our experience has been more sort of director or senior level when consolidating to these groups. It's not a recommendation of the strategy or report. It's simply put out here for consideration as you move forward. Maybe it doesn't happen in the next 5 years even. It's just based on our experience and how we've seen consolidating these corporate service entities. That's the real value. It's not necessarily who's leading them necessarily. It's having them together and sharing standards and those kinds of things.
Thank you. Follow up.
To the chair, thank you. I have a couple of more questions if you could indulge me. I've noted with interest the strategic initiatives that you've outlined through to 2027. And clearly there's a great deal of work that can be done in the IT area relative to cybersecurity, data storage, upgrading technology, servers, and that sort of stuff. And then I see that in 2027, we're starting to think about water and wastewater. I hope that somehow or other we can find some flexibility, because I think our current investments in water and wastewater almost dictates that we advance the timing of that particular strategic initiative to be more immediate than 2027 if we're to get a full measure for the capital investment we're going to be making. Would you, looking at Director Whitfield and Director Whiteman, I believe you're online here, would you kind of concur with that view or assessment? Or
without getting staff to chime in on what's supposed to be clarification from the presenter,
okay,
I would say that would be a council decision at the end of the day, and we would look to staff to make a recommendation on that
okay,
at some point, likely around budget time.
all right. I guess my final question is the proposal that we increase our IT expenditures from 0.68 to 4.3%. Now, my numbers are not the gospel by any means, but if I simply take our 2023 budget, 0.68 suggests that we're spending about 210,000 per year now, and 4.3 would run the number up to $1.3 million per year. So are we to expect or anticipate and plan for $1.3 million per year from now to the end of 2027? Am I understanding that part of your presentation correctly?
Through your worship, the 4.3% is actually a model that Gartner promotes. And that's, so we reference that our sort of range is between 2.5 and 4.5. At the end of the day, these are numbers. And what's important is that the work plan addresses your critical needs. So I wouldn't, it's a model to reflect overall spending, and it helps us benchmark against comparators. It doesn't necessarily indicate that you should spend that. What you should do is spend time on this work plan and assess which are most critical priorities that can be funded. That's likely how I would answer that, Your Worship.
Thank you. Anything further? Anyone else? Well, thank you, Mr. Labelle. We appreciate your presentation, and we'll be looking at a report from the IT manager coming up. A very similar discussion, no doubt.
Thank you very much.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson, that Council receive the presentation from Blair Labelle, Senior Consultant, Perry Group Consulting Ltd, regarding the IT Master Plan. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to our next presentation from Wendy Parker of the Lakeview Family Health Team. Ms. Parker. There you go.
What's that? Got it. Thank you. That was without my glasses. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Hang on for a second. We got some very serious feedback, so we're gonna Try something different.
Is that better? Thank you. Thank you again for allowing me to be here tonight and address the letter that was sent to the mayor and the meeting I later had with Bob Castleman regarding the proposal that the Lakeview Family Health Team is putting forward to the province. In February of this year, Ontario announced that they are going to connect each Ontario with a primary care provider. And to that end, in May, they announced the funding of $64 million over a 2-year period to enhance primary care in communities. Seems like a large number, but it's only $31 million per year across all of Ontario. And that also includes any enhancements to current operating costs to keep the lights on. The Family Health Team was first established here in 2006 and has a really stellar record with the province in terms of our performance. And thanks to the investment of the communities for our ability to recruit physicians to the local areas. The way healthcare is being delivered has changed quite dramatically over the decades, and there is a greater demand than there is supply of health human resources. To that end, we would like to enhance the Family Health Team by creating a nurse practitioner-led model of care, which would increase the number of patients who are currently unattached to a primary care provider to be associated with the Family Health Team. That would allow us to enroll approximately 3,000 to 3,500 more patients from the Brighton community specifically. And we recognize that that's not addressing the gap at all when you look at the population and the number of providers that you have, both physicians and nurse practitioners. But we hope that it would be a first step. There's also next year, so we could, approach the province against next year as part of the strategy. So we are meeting later this week with MPP David Pecuniary, who has been incredibly supportive of the Northumberland, Ontario Health Team, which is now really the regional funder for primary care in our local communities. So the request before the mayor was to seek the support of council to move forward with the expression of interest to the province to fund a nurse practitioner-led clinic under the governance of the Family Health Team. And with that would be the ancillary services of an interdisciplinary team like registered nurses, social workers, enhancing our dietitians so that patients in our community don't have to travel outside, particularly for some residents who find transportation a challenge. And the other part is that it's really at one time, I think it was a unique model in the province, but we have had a nurse practitioner as the most responsible provider in Brighton since 2008 and have had just excellent response from our patients about the quality of care and the timeliness of access. So thank you for allowing me to offer the explanation on our proposal, and I would be quite happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. And I'll note that your correspondence will be read and decided on later in the agenda. I also note that you need to submit your request to the ministry by June 16th. So you really do need an answer one way or the other from council tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The timeline is very short. The applications have to be in by June 16th. We were notified 2 weeks ago to complete the expression of interest. The approval process is through the summer. The review will happen by the ministry, and they're hoping to make the announcement by the fall. One of the other caveats that I think positions Brighton extremely well is that we have the health services building at 170 Main. There's space available there, and that ability to launch the proposal is one of the key considerations that the ministry is looking at. The other piece is one of the criteria is to address attaching unattached patients. And so I just wanted to take a moment to talk about unattached patients in our community who do no longer have a provider due to either retirements of the physicians over the past 5 years, or something that's become more familiar, I think, is functionally unattached patients. So people who move to the local community and retain their physician or nurse practitioner in the community from their previous place of residence. And so, you know, it creates a greater stability in a community if the provider is local. It helps to divert from the emergency and allow for the acute patients to be managed in a more timely fashion. And it opens up capacity in other parts of the province where patients are attached in their community.
Thank you for that. I will open the floor to members of council for questions of clarification, remembering that we will debate the issue under correspondence. So this is just for clarification. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
I think it's wonderful that you're going after this. The Healthcare Connect requires, I can ask some questions, I hope, regarding how this works.
Sure.
Okay.
That would be a question of clarification. So
All right,
yes.
thank you. Well, I just want to make sure. Healthcare Connect makes it so, or has a policy that you need to release yourself from your physician if they're in Windsor or wherever when you come here, and then you wait for them to give you a call. Would a nurse practitioner still fall under the same guideline rules? Or would they be able to maintain that doctor and use the nurse practitioner in Brighton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The process is different for each provider as the most responsible provider. The rules for a physician and rostering with a physician requires that you can only be enrolled with one physician in Ontario at a time. So having said that, that's the reason that the individuals have to de-roster with a physician and then go on Healthcare Connect and then be called off the list. With a nurse practitioner, and the model that we're proposing that's a bit more innovative in my mind is that the patients would be rostered to a nurse practitioner. So the nurse practitioner would be the most responsible provider and would be under the family health team and would not be affiliated with a physician and require the patient to be derostered from their previous physician. Having said that, though, they can only have, the ministry will only pay for one most responsible provider in Ontario. So ultimately, if the individual was successful in being rostered to the nurse practitioner locally, then they would have to deroster and sever that therapeutic relationship with the physician that they'd had.
Great. Follow up.
Sure.
And when we talk about rostering, does the nurse practitioner still have to be connected with a doctor, or will they be? I understand that that's not necessarily the case anymore. They can now be separate.
Interesting question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. There are many models now emerging in the province. Now that nurse practitioners under the College of Nurses in Ontario can work to full scope of practice, they do not require a physician to co-sign on many previous requirements. And so with this model, the nurse practitioners, we're proposing 4 for the clinic. They would work in pods of 2, and it just happens that there are 2 pods at 170 Main, that they would work through an independent practice. They would be independent. They would be a nurse practitioner-led clinic. There are several clinics have been recently approved by the province. You may be most familiar with the Belleville Nurse Practitioner-led clinic. They are under a separate governance model, but with this model that we're proposing, it would fold nicely under the governance model of the family health team. And then the patients would also have access to the interdisciplinary team of nursing, for preventative care, for immunization, all of the programs, lung health, cardiac, well baby, well women programs. So it really integrates more One of the other priorities within this proposal is for attaching those patients in a community who are unattached. And I think we can demonstrate in Brighton with the retirement over the past 5 years that that's a quantifiable number that would meet the requirements.
One last.
One last one.
I'm glad you brought up Belleville. I followed Belleville for quite some time. I noticed it's been growing, and I think the county has something similar, but practitioners down there, because the funding keeps coming to those nurse practitioners through the provincial government. Seems Todd Smith's always got a check for everybody. So is it funded by the province, or is it something that's going to be the community municipality is going to be involved in?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So then there are several models with nurse practitioners. The nurse practitioner led clinic is similar to a family health team model or a community health center model. They're different models that the ministry funds for delivery of care in the community. The nurse practitioner led clinic is under the Hastings and Prince Edward Ontario Health Team. This proposal would be going in under the Northumberland Ontario Health Team with the leadership of David Pecuniary. Our team happens to be in a really unique position because we straddle both boundaries and we have both Ontario health teams. At this point, we're only putting the proposal in for Brighton. Prince Edward is moving forward with a similar type of proposal. Kawartha Lakes has recently been approved for this model, independent of the call, because they were addressing the issues with the lack of physicians in their community. I'm not sure that answered your question,
Yes.
but I think it's important to note that nurse practitioners are not physician replacement, right? They are a model to provide primary care to the full scope of their practice, for preventative care, for acute episodic care, for the management of chronic disease. When we looked at the data in working with Mr. Castleman and the growth projections, the age of 55 plus in this community and those individuals with chronic disease is at a very high level for this community compared to the province. So I think that it is certainly a reasonable criteria to consider the model.
Well, thank you. I'm excited about your proposal and I hope it all works out.
Thank you. So your letter of support is not a monetary request from the municipality. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I just want to make sure that's clear. I already knew the answer.
Thank you. It is really just to show the support, Mr. Mayor, of council on behalf of the members of the community that we move forward with a strategy to get primary care growing in our community. This is year one, not to say we can't do this again in year two. So thank you very much.
And understanding that if we were to support it, we would be supporting the concept of using up those last two existing pods if you were successful in the funding.
That would be ideal. Yes, thank you very much. The situation at 170 Main is very fluid. It's a very integrated model. Oftentimes the family health team is in a separate building and the physicians are in another location. So I think that's another criteria that would, be very interesting to the ministry.
Thank you. Any other questions of clarification before we move on? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Ms. Parker, you just mentioned year one and year two, meaning that you expect that another program will come out next year if you're not successful this year.
The ministry announced the $64 million over 2 years. It's 31 million year one this year, this fiscal year, and then $31 million for 24-25. I'm going to be very optimistic that we will be successful just because we have a model that's already in place. I know we've had this conversation through the mayor and through council a couple of times before. I think the situation in the province is very different now with respect to primary care. And so there would be a two-part answer. A, if we're successful, we would turn around and possibly apply again next year. If we could demonstrate the need in the community, I think with the growth that's happening in Brighton and the surrounding area, there would be reasonableness to do that. I just want to be clear also that raises a really good point through you, Mr. Mayor, that this does not include Crammy Township. This is based only on the municipality of Brighton. And if we weren't successful, then we would leverage the proposal again next year and maybe ask for more.
Thank you both. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Fredis.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. So just to clarify, this would take up all of the space remaining in the last two pods and would preclude any opportunity for us to try and attract blood testing and X-ray services.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I am not aware of any plans that municipality may have around imaging or lab. The two pods that are there are ideally suited to providing primary care, and the space for 4 practitioners to service the 3,500 people in the community would occupy all of the space that's currently within the footprint of the family health team and the physicians who are currently practicing at 170 Main.
Thank you. Anything further? Okay. And just so I can get my numbers right, the two pods, if we were to attract physicians to the community, instead of going down the nurse practitioner road, we would be able to attract 2 physicians versus the 4 nurse practitioners, which would utilize the same space at the 170 Main. Is that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, correct.
Yeah. And 2 physicians would roster, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay.
2 physicians would roster about 2,000, give or take, patients initially, usually.
Currently, it depends if the physicians are working full-time or part-time. Full-time practice is anywhere from 1,000 to about 1,200 patients. 1,200 is pretty high right now. A part-time physician would be 800, 750 to 800, I would say. A nurse practitioner roster would be anywhere from 800 to 900 patients. So for 2 physicians, you would be able to attach 2,200, maybe 25 at the top end. But with a nurse practitioner, with the 4 of them, it would be enhancing the current nurse practitioner and then adding 3 more to each have 850.
So you get to 2,500 or so new patients.
The proposal says 3,400 patients, so I would go forward with that number.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anything further for clarification purposes? Deputy Mayor Anderson.
So we know about recruiting physicians. I don't know a lot about recruiting nurse practitioners. What, I hate the word easy, but I'm going to use it. Is it easier to find or fill positions? And I mean more permanent positions too, not just but somebody that comes in and moves into the community and becomes a nurse practitioner and for some lengthy duration. What's it like recruiting nurse practitioners?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Right now, Health Human Resources in Ontario is incredibly challenging. In all communities, possibly barring the GTA where the denominator is greater, a lot of the organizations are robbing from each other. I think the advantage that we would have locally is the appeal of moving to this community and the lifestyle that's being offered here. For new grads, it would be a great opportunity. They have a way to be mentored, which is always something that we have purported in our team. The other part is that it is a team-based model. So the individuals are not alone. They have a great infrastructure behind them. They have 4 physicians who are currently on site that they can collaborate with. And we've had interest by individuals locally and outside the area to join our team, but we've never had positions. The ministry prescribes the number of positions. We have not had a chance to enhance our team since 2017, when we were given a part-time nurse practitioner and 1 RN. So I would say that I would be optimistic. Sometimes it's the best referral is from the individuals who are already working in our team. So
Thank you very much, Wendy. It's great information.
Who would be responsible for the recruitment process?
that probably me.
Am I looking at her?
I think possibly, yes.
I just, as you very well know, we're engaged with Docs by the Bay for physician recruitment, but that would not be part of their responsibility. Is that
No,
correct?
it would not,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, because this is an enhancement to the actual team that's funded 100% by the province right now. So all of those positions are under the domain of the family health team
Perfect.
and accountable to me and then ultimately to the board.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. In your letter, Wendy, you mentioned the Brighton Quinte Family Health Organization being part of this. Does that mean if at some point we got the nurse practitioners, would we then also be encouraging people from that organization to use practitioners here in Brighton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Brighton Quinte Family Health Organization is the organization that is defined by the Ministry of Health for the physicians. So at one point, we were at 18 physicians in the acronym of AFO. It's really the payment model that the province has defined for physicians in Ontario. So our members of the Family Health Organization are in Colborne, Dr. Nolan. Then we have 4 physicians in Brighton and we have 8 physicians in Trenton. So the collaborative model with a family health team and physicians requires the family health team model and the family health organization of the physicians to work collaboratively together. And that's why it's included in the letter, because I have to demonstrate to the province that the physicians who are organized under the family health organization model in the province will work collaboratively with the family health team and with the nurse practitioners.
Don't ask. Don't do it. Otherwise, we'll be here all night as Wendy tries to explain how family health groups are organized.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure that answered the question. The family health organization is the physicians. It's the physicians, how they work and how they get paid and how they structure. Right now, we work collaboratively with the family health organizations across all 3 sites. This proposal is for the family health team in the partnership with the Brighton Quinte Family Health Organization.
When I said don't ask, I didn't mean that. If you have a question, go ahead and ask.
So Dr. A, B, and C in Trenton has patients who then now requires to see a nurse practitioner quickly. Are they going to be able to come to the Brighton site here to see nurse practitioners in Brighton, even though these patients might be from Trenton and or Colborne, as you just said, under Dr. Nolan? If we're sharing all of this, are we sharing nurse practitioners? This is the part I'm not getting.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the short answer would be no. The Quinte West Clinic and the Brighton Clinic are separate, as is the Colborne Clinic. This is a model for nurse practitioners to support residents of Brighton. These nurse practitioners are independent. They are not dependent on the physician practice. They are not dependent on seeing a physician. It's a group of nurse practitioners who work to the full scope of practice and have their own roster of patients.
So they're not, I couldn't call and say, if this all works out fine, I couldn't call and say, my doctor's on, well, that's not fair. I couldn't call and say, I want to see a nurse practitioner. I would have to call and see my doctor as I normally would, because I am not a patient of the NP clinic. They would roster their own patients as if they were physicians.
That's correct.
You look skeptical. Deputy Mayor.
I am a little bit skeptical. Exactly. I know, I should say, we are not members of the local family health team. However, if I can't see my doctor, I can see a nurse practitioner at the family health team where we go. Okay, so if I need an appointment quickly and I can't get in with my doctor, I can arrange to see the nurse practitioner. So I'm wondering if the same thing will happen here. If there are patients who require appointments quicker than they can get with their doctors, because not all doctors work full time, are we now going to still get an influx from Trenton? I'm just saying, well, you know, we're part of the Brighton Quinte health team. Someone needs to see a doctor, they can't get one, we'll ship them over to a nurse practitioner, rostered or not.
As I understand it, this is entirely for the Brighton site and therefore for Brighton, for unrostered or patients wanting to be rostered in Brighton. But let Wendy answer that.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe just some clarification about the model. Family health teams have a decision to make about how they utilize their nurse practitioners. Our family health team does not utilize nurse practitioners that way. You do not get to see a nurse practitioner if you can't see your physician. The nurse practitioners have their own roster of patients in our family health team.
And that's true today.
Pardon me?
And that's true today.
That is true today.
Right. Yes, here in Brighton.
And at Quinte West.
Right. Deputy Mayor.
Just to clarify, I think Quinte West, there is nurse practitioners and they are working within your organization with some of your physicians or one or two I know of in Quinte West, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's a bit confusing because the physicians at Quinte West hired their own nurse practitioner.
That's what I was driving at.
They have paid for a nurse practitioner to support their practices.
Mhm.
Also, the Lakeview Family Health Team has two nurse practitioners who provide care to their own roster of patients and support programs. Not to make it more confusing,
Right.
but
There it is. Councillor Boutwell.
Thank you through the chair. So what I'm gathering is there are a multitude of different models that can be applied. And in this particular request of support, it is to have independent nurse practitioners operate side by side with the general practitioner, the family practitioner. So they're not downgraded or they're not working together and that they are seeing each other's patients. They have their own independent patients.
through you, Mr. Mayor, that was an excellent explanation of the genesis of the model. Yes.
Okay. And a quick follow-up. I'm sure this is a loaded question.
Okay.
What is the difference between a doctor and a nurse practitioner if they're doing the same functions?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is through scope of practice approved by their colleges. So the College of Physicians and Surgeons has a broader scope, more education for physicians so they can proceed with more extensive or more invasive procedures. Nurse practitioner is an extended class nurse approved by the College of Nurses of Ontario, and their scope of practice is defined with a ceiling that is consistent with the College of Nurses in Ontario.
So if there was a procedure that the patient required and they are a patient that is rostered with a nurse practitioner in Brighton,
Mhm.
and they required an additional service, would they then refer to one of the physicians within the practice, or would they require a referral to a specialist?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the current practice is some of the family physicians refer to their colleagues, their physician colleagues for some procedures. They're not practiced or comfortable, I guess, in doing some of the procedures. So that currently happens. If they need to refer out for specialty care, then the physicians would refer out to consultants, and the nurse practitioners working the full scope of practice can either refer inside the FO to the physicians who have certain areas of expertise they choose to continue to develop, or they can refer outside to a specialist, to a consultant.
So a patient of the nurse practitioner would still have access to a full complement of care, perhaps not strictly just through the nurse practitioner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, absolutely,
Okay. Thank you.
absolutely. The
Thank
full scope of care, diagnostic imaging, lab, the full scope, and any referral to the appropriate provider, whether that is through consultants for mental health and addictions, for child services, elder care.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anything further from members of council? Thank you very much, Ms. Parker.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the opportunity.
Motion before me is moved by Councillor Freda, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the delegation from Wendy Parker, Family Health Team, regarding nurse practitioners at the Family Health Center. Is there any discussion from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And we will consider your correspondence later in the meeting. Thank you. Brings us to our next presentation from Deanna Way, Executive Director, Quinte Museum of Natural History. Ms. Way, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. Thank you so much for having me today. As mentioned, my name is Deanna Way. I am the Executive Director of the Quinte Museum of Natural History, which is located in our neighboring town in Trenton. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of background about our museum. So the concept or the dream for this museum kind of began years ago in 2014. Peter May, president of Research Casting International. It has essentially been a vision of his to open a natural history museum in Quinte West. If you don't know anything about Research Casting International, they are specialists in museum technical services. They are one of the largest providers of their kind, and they actually specialize in dinosaur building. So they really wanted to bring this concept to Quinte West. By 2018, we received charitable status. So we are a nonprofit organization. We had plans to open our doors in 2020, but of course we were delayed a few years by the pandemic. So we officially opened doors in March of 2022. A little bit about me. So prior to becoming executive director here, I actually did work at Research Casting International as a fossil preparator for many years. So I have worked and cleaned many dinosaurs for many museums around the world. I took a brief hiatus where I moved back to Ottawa for about 3 years, and then I decided to move back and take up fossil preparation. And in fact, I ended up getting an apartment here in Brighton, just off Little Lake Road, and it was absolutely beautiful. I've since moved to Belleville. Eventually there was a position open for executive director. I, asked for Peter's blessing. I applied and I was successful. So I am here today to basically show you everything I've done in the last year with the museum, with my team. And I'm quite excited, to show you. So, I guess the next slide, let's get started. So first, I just want to acknowledge many of our partners and supporters through this whole project. So of course, Research Casting International, providing the concept for this museum and also doing a lot of our displays. As well, we have Trenval. So they were essentially champions for us in the very beginning to get our organization kind of off the ground. We have Wilkinson as a champion sponsor for us for the second year in a row. TACLA Foundation, Meta Employment Services. Of course, the City of Quinte West, they have committed to $4 million towards the building of our Grand Museum later on in the future. And the Government of Canada, one of the things I'd like to talk to you today is about what we did with the grant money. So we were recipients of the FedDev Tourism Relief Fund last year, and we are just wrapping up that project now. Next slide. As well, I want to acknowledge our board of directors. So we are very fortunate to have quite the diverse and outstanding team here. We have Suzanne Andrews. She is the QMNH chair. She's also the CEO of the Quinte West Chamber of Commerce. We have Chris King of the Quinte Economic Development Commission. We have paleontologist extraordinaire of the Royal Ontario Museum. His name is David Evans. Doug Stephen from the Bay of Quinte Marketing Board. Kirk Gregoire of Wilkinson and Company. Of course, Peter May from Research Casting International. Robert Pilon of Telecor and Northern Rural Net. And City Councillor Sally Freeman. Next slide. And this is our team. We are small but mighty. That's me in the center there. We are supported by Madeline Hoyle, who's the museum interpretive coordinator, and Michaela Barney, who is our museum creative coordinator. These two have been absolutely fantastic in getting this latest exhibit underground. They are the ones that are responsible for all of the written content you're going to see, as well as the intellectual content. They are the directors of our creativity and our aesthetics, and as well as cultivators of our culture here at the museum. Next slide. So this is essentially the real meat and potatoes of what I want to talk to you about today. It's essentially our funding and what we did with it. So as I mentioned, we were recipients of the Tourism Relief Grant to the tune of $449,395, so nearly $500,000. And this project had major milestones that we had to hit. So the construction of the exhibit space and an exhibit launch by March 31st, 2022, a grand opening and wayfinding installed by June 30th, 2022, a new website launched by December 31st, 2022, a new exhibit installed and opened by March 31st, 2023. Next slide. Luckily for us, we were pretty much ready to go right out of the gate. We were able to launch our inaugural exhibit on March 16th, 2022. This is primarily thanks to Research Casting International for essentially getting this space prepared and launching their inaugural exploration exhibits. The museum, it featured, 4 different exhibits on 4 main dinosaur types. So we had our carnivorous dinosaurs, where you're going to see the ever famous T-Rex. We had the horned dinosaurs, where you're going to find a Triceratops, armored dinosaurs featuring an Ankylosaurus, and then the long-necked dinosaurs, where we had a full-size Malawisaurus skeleton. And in the month of our launch, so in March 2022, we had over 3,000 visitors in through the door. Next slide. With our success and after finding out we received the funding in May, we got hard to work. We established a marketing task force, which included members of our board, members of the QMNH team, and members from Research Casting International. We deployed about $30,000 into marketing through rack cards, wayfinding, print, poster, radio, magazines, and online marketing. Next slide. And of course, that brings us to milestone number 2. I have Suzanne Andrews to thank a lot for getting our grand opening ready to go. It was also the day that I was officially announced as the next executive director of Quinte Museum of Natural History. Next slide. And as well, we got our wayfinding installed. So huge thanks to Jennifer Rushlow of the City of Quinte West for getting our city wayfinding installed, and as well to Katie of Dollar Signs for locations on Marmora and Dixon and Sydney Street in Trenton. So some of the fun results we got from our inaugural exhibit. Our exhibit ran from March to December 31st, 2022. Overall, we had 18,000 visitors come. We spent about $30,000 on marketing, and we made about $84,000 in admissions revenue. And at this time, our admission rate was $6 a person plus tax, with children 4 and under being free admission. As well, we managed to maintain a 4.7 star rating on Google. We're still at 4.7 stars. And social media and word of mouth happened to be the most popular way that people were hearing about us. Next slide. These are just some of our regional groupings as well. So about 55% of the people coming through the door were actually from Hastings County. And of course, we had visitors from Prince Edward County, Northumberland, Peterborough, Kingston, Durham, Ottawa, Southwestern Ontario, the GTA, Northern Ontario, not Ontario, but in Canada. And as well, we even had international visitors. Next slide. So we did a lot of planning for 2023. We really wanted to come in and offer more added value to our visitors. And we also needed to achieve 2 more milestones. So we had plans to develop a new website. We also figured if we were going to do a new website, we also wanted to rebrand and have a fresh new look. We also needed to plan, develop, and execute an exhibit. And if you don't know anything about exhibit planning and development, it takes a lot of time, and we only had months, but we were successful. As well as to plan and execute a comprehensive marketing strategy just based on the data we received in 2022. We also wanted to immortalize our very first exhibit. So creating a virtual tour so that people can see the dinosaurs over and over again, even though some of them have actually gone on tour. We also wanted to increase our capacity for programming. So updating our schooling and educational programming, develop some online activities for visitors as well, which I think is very important in a post-pandemic world. We also wanted to boost our social media presence, participate in more community events. I've got Apple Fest on my mind for this year, hopefully. Yep. We also wanted to create a kids zone in the museum and create a small permanent exhibit focused on Quinte region fossils, and as well as open gift shop, because that happened to be a pretty big criticism of people walking in through the door. They're basically like, what can I buy? Where are the things? So we wanted to add a gift shop as well. Next slide. So milestone number 3, we got a new website and we rebranded. So this is just an image of our old website here. Personally, it's kind of lacking. So we're going to go to the next slide. And this is now our new website with our updated branding. We worked with a company called They Integrated out of Belleville, and they essentially knocked our vision out of the park. We didn't want to stray too far from our original wordmark. We wanted to keep it somewhat consistent so people still know who we are, but we also wanted to add in a logo. Next slide. So now we actually have interchangeable logos. So that was sort of one of the neat features that They Integrated did for us. They made our logo dynamic enough that we can interchange it depending on our featured exhibit. So our main logo is the ammonite, and that is to be reflective of our regional fossil environment. But of course, we also have the whale for this year's exhibit and a T-Rex to represent last year's exhibit as well. Next slide. All right, so milestone number 4. We were successful in developing and executing and installing an exhibit in a matter of about, I'd say, 4 months. And the exhibit is called Diving Deep, A Tale of Whales Through Time. So essentially, visitors have the opportunity to explore the evolutionary journey of the whale. They did start off as land creatures, then they move their way into the water. Some move their way back onto land and then back into the water again. So it's actually quite a very interesting story. And then they can move into modern whales, and those are actually like evolutionarily divided between toothed whales and baleen whales. So there really is lots to learn for visitors. Next slide. And these are just some images as well. So in addition to Diving Deep, A Tale of Whales Through Time, we included 2 additional exhibits. One is the permanent exhibit on Quinte local fossils, and then another one on the T-Rex. So next slide. As mentioned, 3 all new exhibits, fossilized Quinte, permanent exhibit, and it's actually a nice little touch table for people. They can actually go in and touch stuff at the museum. And then it's lights, camera, action, T-Rex, and film. So a huge delight for us was that we were able to keep some of our T-Rex dinosaurs, and we decided to put a new spin on their story. And then, of course, diving deep, A Tale of Whales Through Time. We also introduced a new kids zone, so kids can read, they can draw, they can color, and they can play while they're in the space. We introduced a new seating area and a welcome zone. So, sometimes people come in with their coffees, they're able to sit down and enjoy their coffees before they go through the exhibit. We did launch a comprehensive marketing plan. So you're going to see us, you're going to hear us on the radio, you're going to see us online, and you're going to see us in print all over the place this year. And we have a gift shop. So we've got shirts, totes, sculptures, and books, and hopefully adding more as we go along. Next slide. And as well, we introduced 5 new educational programs, and they are developed with Ontario school curriculum links. So they will work with the school system. Currently, that number is now 11 school programs booked before before summer begins, which is quite fascinating considering we never did any formal marketing for it. So teachers are actually knowing about us, they're coming to us. So now we have these programs booked. We also seem to be a hit amongst group tours. So women's institutes and retirement homes seem to love enjoying our museum. We did launch our museum at home activities. So there's many crafts for families that they can go online and do an activity. We also have our virtual tour of our dinosaur exhibit. So if you haven't seen it, you'll be able to find it online. We also launched a new blog. It's called Voices of QMNH, and it features stories from our staff and our volunteers. And we are launching a summer social program where we're going to try to appeal to the more adult market, featuring yoga nights, paint nights, and we're also going to be doing a floral workshop. And we've updated our sponsorship package for continued corporate support because it's something that's very important to us. Next slide. And this is just some imagery of our new updated branding, marketing. So our rack cards, our summer social program. There's an example from our corporate sponsorship page and a screenshot from our blog. There's about 3 or 4 blog entries up there now. Next slide. And as well, this is just samples of our school programming. So Little Life Cycles, Junior Scientists, Change Makers, Eco Explorers, and one for kindergartners called Curious Classrooms. This is kind of where it gets quite exciting. This is probably my favorite slide. So investing in the community, as I mentioned, we had a grant of nearly $500,000, and I'm happy to report $330,400 was pumped back into local businesses in the Hastings, Prince Edward County, and Northumberland regions. If you include the amount that went into staff salaries, we're looking at about $484,000 that we reinvested into the people and communities that actually support the Quinte Museum of Natural History. And we're also getting a lot of amazing feedback. In fact, I've been blown away by how well received this exhibit and this museum has been to the public and the community. So just a very small snippet of what to expect. So great little exhibit, saw it yesterday. Great place. We've been more than once, worth the visit. So this kind of feedback is awesome. Next slide. As well, I want to give a special thank you to all of our volunteers. So we are very fortunate to have like an incredible team of knowledgeable and dedicated volunteers, and they are essentially the lifeblood of our organization. At the Quinte Museum of Natural History, we believe that a visit to a natural history museum essentially sets people on a lifelong course of wonder and excitement regarding the natural world around them. And it is our vision to open that door and set that imagination alight. And as well, it is our mission to inspire discovery, conservation, and stewardship of our natural heritage. And we are lucky to have volunteers that inspire our visitors every single day. So looking forward into 2023 and beyond, this year we're expecting 22% increased capacity, so about 22,000 total visitors for this year. We're gearing up for hopefully a very, very busy summer. We're expected to make 156,000 in our admissions revenue. And this is due to a slight increase in our admission rate. We will be participating in more community events. We're planning for doors open. We recently went to Science Rendezvous in Kingston where we saw over 5,000 families. We just did Quinte West Fest, and again, Apple Fest is on my hit list. We are expecting an influx of educational programs in the fall, and we are planning for an exhibit for 2024. And hopefully we'll be able to announce that soon, and as well ongoing planning for our capital campaign, because the goal at the end of the day is to have a state-of-the-art museum on the banks of the Bay of Quinte. Next slide. Oh, yes. So essentially, I really only have one request here today, and that's to invite mayor and councillors to the museum for a personal tour. We really are doing great things, and we would really love for you to see us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Way. I'll open the floor to members of council for questions of clarification, but I'll let you know that my wife and I have already been talking about grabbing our young nieces and coming to see you at some point in the summer. So that's the plan.
Good.
Hopefully that plan works out. And if not, you'll see me anyway, because I'm a bit of a museum geek. So there you go. Members of council. Councillor Rowley.
Yes, so I've already sent an email to staff person regarding Apple Fest. Can you bring a whale?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I honestly don't know if we could, but we could try.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think you'd be a great asset to Apple Fest. And like Mayor Ostrander, I have two grandchildren who are just chomping at the bit to come down and see you. So we'll be there this summer.
That's great news.
Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Way. We appreciate your presentation. We like your ask too. It's our favorite kind of request.
Oh, good. Well, I hope to see you there. And again, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the presentation from Deanna Way, Executive Director of the Quinte Museum of Natural History. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Director Whitfield, are there any citizens' comments in the bin? Thank you. That takes us straight into staff reports. Our first report is with regard to the Information Technology Master Plan report. Mr. Casabo, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Not at this time.
Thank you. The motion is moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council endorse in principle the Information Technology Master Plan as presented by the Perry Group Consulting. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. So by endorsing in principle, basically what we're saying is we will modify this report to kind of better suit immediate needs and our financial wherewithal over the coming years. And there's the opportunity to rejiggle some of the priorities of these strategic initiatives. Am I understanding that correctly?
Feels like a leading question, but Mr. Casabo.
That's correct, yes.
So we can anticipate that staff will bring forward a plan ahead based on this plan and other priorities in the municipality. Is that true?
That's true. Yes, it's a good roadmap, but it's not perfect. And like you say, it's there's obviously a lot of room for improvement and a modification to suit our needs.
Go ahead.
Just to follow up, if I may. Earlier, I threw out some numbers, and the gentleman from the consulting firm responded, but I'm not quite sure I understood his response because he alluded to a range of numbers from 2.5 to 4.5. But just so that I can get my head around it for upcoming budget years, are we looking at something in the order of $1 million to $1.3 million
Director Whitfield?
No. I looked at the PowerPoint that was presented this evening, and Blair had talked about $110,000 was our current spend in IT. And that was based on my best guess going through, because we don't put all IT in one account. It goes to various departments. And he was basing our total net levy of around 16 million, which is high. And that the 110,000 did not include any of our IT managers' wages. And so that number was low already. But when I looked at if we were to go to 4.5% based on the numbers he was giving, it looked like $688,000 a year, which is extremely high and a huge jump in budget. So I think that the best thing we can do is come forward with a strategy to address some of the, well, first of all, we'll look at the lower hanging fruit first, and then look at some of the priorities that we know we have on the books right now. And then also look at John's role in the organization, because it was defined loosely with the job description when he started. And I think the hope at that time was that John would replace managed service, but we're looking at it as though that might be a big ask for one person to replace a group of people. So I think that there's a lot of strategies that we can bring forward in 2023 through report, and also establish that team, that staff team that will start working toward the broader picture. Because Blair was absolutely correct when we've been handling IT kind of departmentally, and a lot of different people have their hand in it, and it hasn't had any central focus and any broad view. And that's where we need to go. We need to step back, get our broad view, and then bring that forward to council on what that's going to look like. And it is going to cost some money, but what we be bringing forward in the 23 budget or 24 budget, we don't know yet.
But it won't be $1.5 million.
It will not be.
Councillor Fredis.
Just to follow up, if I may, I'm not adverse if the number is 1.3, if there's a legitimate reason for doing so. I mean, cybersecurity and data storage are really critical to this operation. I mean, every day you read about somebody being held ransom for millions of dollars because some cyber security hackers got into the system. So my view is we need to spend what we need to spend to ensure the sanctity and the safety of municipal data. And so I kind of like the direction this is going in. Now, I'm not saying go out and make it 2.6, but at the same time, I'm saying let's not get penny wise and dollar foolish. I mean, if we're going to do it, could we do it right? That's all I'm asking.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? So I'm not sure I would double down on Councillor Fredis's comments about if it's 1.3, it's 1.3, but I would say that and I don't speak for everyone, but I would suggest that security needs to be sort of our number one task, and then customer focused service provisions need to be right there beside it from a customer facing entity perspective, which is what the municipality is, as you know. So those are sort of my priorities, and if council likes to swim along with me, that's great, and if not, they should speak up. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think that our internal customer service has improved vastly with the addition of John, who will be here a year tomorrow, by the way, already. I think that our external communications has improved with our economic development team and some of the social media that we have in place now and the website development. And that's becoming more and more important as time goes on. And we are looking at some changes right now with the website as far as how it's going to look and feel. And so there is a team that's working on that right at the moment. So that's an ever evolving thing. So I think that's important that we're communicating appropriately. And as far as our risk and our security risk to the outside world, everybody has it. We have to recognize that. We have to put in all the parameters that we need to ensure that we're operating in the safest way possible. Human error is usually the reason somebody gets in the door. So education and outreach is really important. And so we're going to strive to come up with some more training and programming on that. But like I said, we're going to come up with a nice little, strategy to move forward with as using this as our base, but not using this as our Bible.
Thank you for that. It's appreciated. And when could council anticipate another report that would suggest what the plan will be? I mean, if we're obviously accepting this in principle, meaning staff aren't 100% willing to tell us to endorse or ask us to endorse the plan, I presume that staff would want to come forward with a plan so that we're not being accused of getting another report that we put on the shelf.
I think it's, we know better once we establish the IT governance group and have a meeting or two under our belts. And once that's worked out, then we'll know better when we can provide a better report.
So as long as it's top of mind, that's fine with me. Anything further from members of council? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Thank you. Next report is with regard to Highway 401 planning study, emergency detour routes. Director Whiteman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Not at this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis, that council receive the staff report regarding Highway 401 planning study, emergency detour routes, and further that council adopt Telephone Road as the best suited emergency detour route. Is there any discussion? Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, is there a requirement for us to have a public consultation with this proposal?
I imagine we would at some point, but we're really early days at this stage. But Director Whiteman?
Well, there was just an overall PIC that was held last week at the Township of Crammy Keeler Center. It is early days. It's the preliminary design. So I'm sure there will be ensuing further public consultation.
I presume, Director Whiteman, that if we were to be given the go-ahead by the Ministry of Transportation to alter our emergency detour route to the north on Telephone Road, that we would be required to go through the whole EA process, which would then be a very public-facing process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we're just early days, and Councillor Fredis, what this allows us to do is then approach the ministry, Brighton, Crammy, and Northumberland, and start talking about getting the detour route up there in advance of the closure of those bridges that we heard about a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Any further discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next report is with regard to the memorial bench and tree donation policy. This is a resubmission. Director Miller, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Just that through you, Mr. Mayor, that have given the background information to council with the rationale and with an A and a B, whether you accept the prices that we provided or you decide to reduce it or what have you.
Very well. So the motion before me does not have an option chosen. So we'll be looking to the mover and seconder to do that. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell and seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson that council passes a motion to adopt the staff report, which creates a new public donation policy for memorial benches, trees, and stones. And A, approves the revised public pricing as recommended by staff for the donation of memorial benches, memorial trees, and memorial stones on municipal properties. Or B, that the municipality of Brighton will subsidize the cost of the purchase and delivery of the donated bench along with a name plaque and concrete bench pad, and the tree purchase with plaque and the stone purchase and delivery along with the cost of engraving on memorial stones by X%, X being the factor we need to add, of the price suggested by municipal staff. Councillor Butwell, this is your motion. How would you like to proceed?
Based on the discussion that we had at that meeting, I'd love to hear what other people's ideas are. And I realize that that's a motion that's made. I would prefer to do a cost share myself.
And we'll leave the percentage blank for a second. How's that?
Exactly, yeah.
So the motion on the floor is B. It's the B motion, a cost percentage. Members of council. Oh, Councillor Wright, when did you come? You're very sneaky. Welcome. Welcome. Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. Director Miller, in your opinion, if we did cost sharing, would we end up with more benches overall?
Director Miller, where's your crystal ball, Jim?
Yeah, that's a hard question because over the years, we haven't had a lot of people asking for benches. You may, once this gets passed and gets out in the public realm, a bit more information, it may make a few people, pick up the phone and ask. It's hard to say.
Go ahead.
I guess the sense I'm trying to get is this getting the public to pay for benches that we would otherwise pay for ourselves, or is this going to be new benches in new places that we otherwise wouldn't have benches?
Director Miller?
Well, I would like to think that it would be the benches that we placed in a spot that would be suitable for the town or the municipality, as far as our planning goes. Certainly don't want to be putting benches up just for the sake of benches. It has to be thought of, location wise. So in essence, yeah, it is helping the municipality with putting in benches and tables and what have you.
Deputy Mayor?
And I think that's exactly why the cost share should come into place. If it was just going to go wherever the person or the group that wanted to invest in that bench, and just where they wanted it, that wouldn't work. So by cost sharing, we have a say in it. We're going to have to maintain it too, I presume. So there will be a maintenance part of that. So I don't expect it to be a large amount, but I think it would be a nice incentive to add more benches if we do take part. But we do have a say in exactly where it goes and the maintenance of it.
Councillor Rao, go ahead, Jim.
Mr. Mayor. I mean, it could work, once we get some new developments, with the new subdivisions coming in and we get some planning for the parks. It may work just like public skating does. We put it out to the public that we're looking for donations or sponsors for benches. First come, first served. It may work that way too down the road. And that way there's some ownership.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jim, for kind of rejigging this report. I agree, we do need more benches. We need them in lots of places. So it would be nice if we could get some help from some people. I would wonder if saving some money could be, I think it was discussed the last time, and I didn't read it in your report, where we maybe do it twice a year, that we, so that we're not having a cement truck come for one pad, one a month. If we do, say, have twice a year. So that could save the municipality a few dollars as well. If we did it, once a year or twice a year, that we could work with that. But I agree, the cost sharing thing would be the way to go, so that we have a little bit of say as well.
Anything further from members of council? Councillor Fredis?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Butwell and Rowley, and I guess Deputy Mayor Anderson. I think it should be a cost sharing thing, at least so that we have some level of control over placement and number and timing. All of those, I think, behoove us. Ultimately, it will lead some additional benches, hopefully, but I think it should be on a cost sharing basis. The question is, what's the number?
That will be my next question. You're right. Councillor Wright.
I would think almost a 50% would be feasible in my mind, because I know in talking with the DBIA, we had a conversation about the last bench that went in, and the DBIA had paid, I think, 800 or 900 for it at that time. And that was a couple years ago. And this, I think this would make it a little bit more palatable, still encourage people to potentially put benches in, but not be so unpalatable that it scares them off.
I have 50%. Do I hear anything else? Councillor Butwell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that was the number I was bouncing in my head as well. So 50% seems reasonable to me.
This is your motion. Deputy Mayor, would you be able to support 50% as the seconder?
Well, I considered it a little richer than what I was thinking. But I'm gonna get outvoted on this one. I believe we are using taxpayers' money here. I don't know how many a year there would be, but maybe only 3 or 4, but it wouldn't, I don't think it would be substantial. I know we'd like to see hundreds of them everywhere. I need a bench once in a while. So I think 50% though, if it's something that the folks want, and it's something that they want the plaque, it's going to be placking on it. It's their ownership, not our ownership. It's our ownership as far as making sure it's in the right place and it's maintained. If they're not maintained, there's all kinds of reasons maintenance comes up. I think it's let those that want to sponsor it take ownership of it, and we can support it with maybe 25%, I think, but 50% of using taxpayers' money for a lot of different things adds up. So that's my opinion, but I will support the person that my colleague who made the motion without interfering with if the motions change with an amount.
All I'm looking for is for you to say yes or no to 50% so we can debate the motion.
Well, I'm going to say no to the no. Well, that all you're waiting.
That's all I'm waiting for. So if you say no,
I'm saying no, and let's talk about it.
No. So if you say no, you're withdrawing as the seconder, and I'll have to seek a seconder.
Okay, go ahead.
You're withdrawing as the seconder?
I guess we can't discuss it.
So 50% is the number by the mover. Is there a seconder to the motion? Thank you, Councillor Wielden. I will open the floor for discussion. I think you've made your point.
I made my point.
All right. Anyone else? Councillor Butwell.
Through the chair, I would assert that benches are a feature that we would want to have throughout our municipality. Our demographic would ask likely for additional benches. It's a nice way for people to stop and sit and look around, have conversation, and encourages the sense of community. And we really should be looking at doing this ourselves. And it's nice that there are individuals who are wishing to sponsor benches as well. So take advantage of it, and 50% of the cost of the bench, perhaps have them do the plaque. The family themselves do the plaque, and then, or whichever gets us there. At this point, I was thinking 50% cost share on the bench, and the family can have the plaque done.
That changes the motion.
Okay, well then we'll just go with 50% then.
50% it is.
50% it
For
is.
simplicity's sake.
It truly is my view that we should be providing these throughout our community regardless. And if this is an opportunity to have private individuals come on, so I don't see it as an abuse of taxpayers' money. I see it as a good use of taxpayers' money to increase the livability of our community.
Thank you for that. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor.
Totally agree with Councillor Butwell. There again, and I don't know if this would need to be amended to the motion, but is this something, could we revisit this in about a year? Based on the interests that we have this year, we might have to relook at, just review the whole thing.
Will this become part of our fees and charges bylaw?
Yes.
So we will revisit it annually.
So we would be revisiting it. Okay, that's fine then.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
We talked about sponsorship earlier too. You know, the municipality picks up the tab for a lot of this. We have developers all over the place. We have development all over the place. We have new commercial coming. I believe that some of that should be put right in, that we see some of that. We talk about sidewalks, we talk about, you know, all those things. So if we keep adding on what we're picking up the tab for, it should be maybe, if you want benches, is this going to include rural Brighton as well? Or is it just going to be in the urban area?
I would presume it would be wherever the person wants the bench to be placed,
Well,
if
but
it's reasonable to do so. Director Miller?
Mr. Mayor, we'd have to look to increase our budget because we don't normally have this type of expense in the budget for benches if we're going to be paying half.
Right, because right now it's paid 100% by the person who wants the bench, right? Councillor Wright.
I was just, I keep going back to the figure that we discussed at the DBIA, $800 or $900, and looking at the more expensive option here, 50% is like $1,150. So it's not a huge leap for someone to pay $800 or $900 to go to $1,150. So I think the 50% mark, it just feels right in terms of what we're asking the public to potentially pay when it's going to benefit the whole community. It is a memorial to someone, but it's going to benefit the whole community.
And the number may go up in the future as cost pressures hit the municipality and changes in government, et cetera, right? So, Director.
Just one last comment, through Mr. Mayor. That price that we've quoted is with the pad as well, installed concrete. That it's not just the bench price.
It's an all-in installation price. Yeah, very well. Councillor Fredis.
I think the 50% number is good. I guess to the comment about developers and stuff, I would suggest this probably doesn't preclude them from the opportunity of asking us to put a plaque on that promotes their development and ponying up 50%. The other thing in terms of utilization, it's interesting that Councillor Butwell acknowledged that people have a need for these. Coming into the council meeting tonight, just around the corner from the Imperial gas station, there was this nice young lady sitting on the Quinte transit bench reading a paper. What does that tell you about the need for benches at least in the urban area of Brighton?
I just hope she wasn't waiting for the bus.
That ran through my mind as well. I was going to roll down the window and say, "It ain't coming unless you
made the phone call."
Yeah.
Byron, she won't be there long if she's reading our paper. Hello.
Oh, Ron. Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up. I assume it wasn't to make that quippy joke. You're good.
I'm waiting for that one.
Deputy Mayor dad joke over there. Anything further from members of council? Councillor Wheeldon.
I just wanted to highlight the overall goal that I certainly have, and I think is largely shared, of increasing the walkability of Brighton. The reference made in the original proposal was to Alice. I walk with my kids a lot as they've grown up in Brighton, and I swear the only person in this town who walked more than us was Alice, because we could never go out walking without passing her. And so we still walk by almost every day, but walk by the bench that's dedicated to her. And yet Brighton is still terribly unwalkable in many respects. It's a long slog to get from south of the tracks to downtown. And so a few more waypoints like Alice's would probably go a long way.
Thank you for that. Anything further from members of council? So the motion is B and 50% is filled in. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Brings us to a report on naming of a new municipal trail link. Director Miller, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
No, not this time.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder that council receive the staff report regarding naming of the new municipal trail link, and further that council passes a motion requesting municipal staff to advertise, requesting the community's participation in the naming of the Parks and Recreation Department's latest trail link located on municipal property between Mount Hope Cemetery and Castle Ridge subdivision. Seconded by Councillor Butwell. Any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon?
There had been some concern about this going forward. I take it it's going forward.
It has not stalled.
Okay.
That is
wonderful.
correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything further? Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. Next motion is with regard to the rescheduling of the July council meeting dates. Madam Clerk, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
I do not.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder that council receive the staff report regarding rescheduled July council and planning meetings, and that council approve the July 24th and July 26th for the council planning meetings for July 2023. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And the next report is with regard to the Mount Hope Cemetery bylaw. Deputy Clerk, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, I do not.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder that council receive the Mount Hope Cemetery bylaw staff report for information, and that council approve the draft bylaw to provide for rules and regulations for the care and control of the Mount Hope Cemetery, and further that the draft cemetery bylaw be sent for approval by the Bereavement Authority of Ontario prior to ratification at a future meeting of council. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wright, thank you. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Next report is the 2023 Department Work Plans First Quarter Report. CAO Castleman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
I do, Your Worship. I thought we would have an opportunity to give our committee members a chance to provide the community with an update on our current review of the strategic plan. It's an important document, and we've established a committee to review same and to bring forward some recommendations to the community. So we have, I think, all members of the team here, and perhaps you could choose one to give the community an update.
I think it would be fair to say we meet tomorrow. We meet tomorrow, but we have done some significant work. If it's okay, Councillor Wheeldon, I will turn the floor over to you. Councillor Wheeldon has taken a significant leadership role in the strategic planning process, and so I think it would be appropriate for Councillor Wheeldon to have his say here, if that's okay with you.
That is, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the strategic plan review team has met 3 times now. I think we've had, we agreed upon dates and times for public consultation, and did hire a facilitator, Jenny White, who led us through 4 sessions, a Saturday, a morning, an afternoon, and an evening session, so that we could get as much public engagement as possible. And she has since prepared a report, which we are going to go through tomorrow morning to look at the public feedback on that. I've read through the report myself, made a few minor edits as sort of her first eyes on the report, and it is of high quality. There's some really good feedback from the public about their vision for Brighton's future, about the things that they really believe makes Brighton great, and the ideas that they have for how we could improve. So we're going to compare that with the SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that has been done internally among staff and councillors. And so we're going to look at those documents sort of side by side and see, okay, internally and externally, what do we see as our priorities moving forward? Comparing that also with the campaign promises that we all made last year. And of course, with the existing strategic plan from the previous term of council. And so we'll be able to sort of chart a through line through all of those different inputs to figure out where we should recommend to go next. And I believe the next step after that, Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we would then have a discussion with all of council about it.
That is the intent, of course. The strategic plan will be council's document. So the strat plan review team tomorrow will be offering some recommendations to council as we move it forward. But essentially, that is correct. Anything further, CAO? Thank you. The motion before me is moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the 2023 first quarter work plan report for information. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Go ahead, Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Perhaps just more of a question. There's a number of initiatives on here that I'm tickled pink to see that are there, particularly the one relative to arrangements being made with Granicus. I don't want to keep us here all night asking a million questions about each of these things. So if the CAO doesn't mind, perhaps I could follow up with him and some of the other directors over the next couple of days and just glean a little more information for my personal benefit, if that's all right.
As long as you start with the CAO, that's just fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything further from members of council? Those in favor? Those opposed? Motion's carried. We have no notices of motion or motions. We have nothing listed under unfinished business, which brings us to bylaws. The first is with regard to the Smithfield School Playground Use Memorandum of Understanding bylaw. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board and the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton regarding joint usage of a playground at Smithfield Public School. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next bylaw is with regard to rescinding bylaw 037-2022 in response to COVID-19 delegation of authority. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to rescind bylaw 037-2020 to delegate authority in response to COVID-19 pandemic. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Next bylaw is an agreement with Jennifer White for Consultant Strategic Plan 2023. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton and Jennifer White to undertake facilitation services related to the municipal strategic planning as required. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to reports of advisory committees of council, reports, minutes, and council reports. The first is the Applefest Advisory Committee. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. The council approved the April 19th, 2023 Applefest Advisory Committee meeting in minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. The next is Community Events and Civic Awards Advisory Committee. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council approved the April 11th, 2023 Community Events and Civic Awards Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley, and before you note, I will note that I've added the word civic in front of awards in the motion.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor Rowley.
So I should have maybe announced this earlier on, but community events. Our Concert in the Park series starts up this Wednesday night with our own local Bentwood rocker. Proceeds from the 50 this week goes to the food bank. So hope to see you all there. Should be a great evening.
It always is a great evening with the opening of Music in the Park. Any other comments or questions? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Accessibility Advisory Committee with a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council received the March 17th, 2023 Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. Sustainability Advisory Working Committee. That's not what it's called, is it? Understood. Thank you. With a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder, that council received the July 13th, 2022 Sustainability Advisory Working Committee meeting minutes as presented. It's seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Rural Advisory Committee meeting minutes, also from last term of July 28th, September 28th, and April 26th, is moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder. The council received the July 28th, 2022, September 28th, 2022, and April 26th, 2023. So that one's from this term. Rural Advisory Committee meeting minutes as presented. And it's seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. And from the task force to commemorate the 1973 tornado, it's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council received the March 21st and April 18th, 2023 task force to commemorate the 1973 tornado meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Move on to reports and minutes of statutory committees, boards, and external agencies. The first comes from our library board. It's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council received the Brighton Public Library Board May 3rd, 2023 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. From the DBIA, it's moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. Council received the DBIA meeting minutes for January 12th, the AGM of February 9th, meeting of March 9th, and April 13th, 2023 as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Lower Trent. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, and I will need a seconder. The council received the Lower Trent Conservation Board meeting minutes of April 13th, 2023 as presented. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Wright. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And from the Codrington Community Association, it's moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council received the CCA April 27th, 2023 meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. That brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first is from the City of Port Colborne with regard to the Municipal Heritage Registry. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council support the request from the City of Port Colborne and the Town of Grimsby regarding changes to the Municipal Heritage Register. Is there any discussion? All in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from the Township of Woolwich regarding Bill 5, it's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the request from the Township of Woolwich regarding Bill 5, the Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Just to note that though I still very much support this, the province has already voted it down.
Understood. Councillor Wright. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. And from the city of Port Colborne with regard to the Highway Traffic Act amendments, it's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that the city of Port Colborne request for that doesn't make any sense. Councillor Wheeldon, are we supporting or receiving?
Supporting.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the correspondence from the city of Port Colborne with request to support. No, that doesn't make any sense either. Regarding Highway Traffic Act amendments, is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Just to note that other Northumberland municipalities have also supported this.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. Just a point of clarification. It's actually the city of Cambridge that enacted the resolution for the expanded use of ASEs by municipalities beyond safety zones. And Colborne was simply affirming the resolution of Cambridge. So perhaps we should be looking at supporting the Cambridge resolution and not the Port Colborne. Just a question.
Yeah, I see your point though, Councillor Fredis. The original motion comes from the city of Cambridge and it's a motion of support that we'd be supporting. So either way, we can just change it to we support the motion from the city of Cambridge. Councillor Wheeldon, it's your motion.
That's fine. I'm okay with that amendment. It's effectively a chain letter.
It
doesn't actually
is,
matter.
yes. So I have changed correspondence to motion and Port Colborne to Cambridge. Councillor Rowley is the second. Are you okay with that? Any further discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. And a request for proclamation of Seniors Month. It's moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council support the request to proclaim June as Seniors Month. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. And from the National Chronic Pain Society, requesting council pass a motion with regard to the maintenance of OHIP coverage. It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council support the request from the National Chronic Pain Society to pass a motion to request the Government of Ontario to maintain OHIP coverage for chronic pain treatments and continue to provide much needed care for the people of Ontario. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And from the Brighton Minor Hockey Association, the motion is moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Wheeldon, that council receive the request from Byron McBride, President, BMHA, to consider lowering the ice rental fees for minor hockey season 2023-2024. And I would just let everyone know, in the prevailing emails since then, it was this all started as a result of the shed at King Ed, and that they used to be canteens that were used by minor hockey. And so there was some pushback by our minor hockey friends, even though those canteens may have been underutilized in the course of many years, that they were losing some potential revenue. So our communications, economic development communications folks reached out to minor hockey and offered all sorts of options, I think, with the assistance of Mr. Miller. And most of them were not things that the Minor Hockey Association would be willing to do, including have a booth at Applefest and things like this. In the prevailing discussion by email between everyone, minor hockey would like us to consider providing them with the canteen at the arena pro bono. So I'm looking to staff because there's some discussion going on. Mr. Miller?
Well, I think we're only charging them like $300 for the year, so it's not a real big savings.
Nor a terribly large loss. So I'm wondering if council would have an opportunity to support this and change rental fees to the rental of the canteen. Go ahead, Councillor Botwell.
Through the chair to Director Miller. Is the canteen an exclusive rental?
Yes, it's a contracted rental.
So it is an exclusive contracted rental for the period of 1 full year for $300?
Yes, it was a motion from council in previous years.
It would seem like that is not market rent to begin with. Anywhere close to.
Again, without knowing what their revenues and expenses are, it's hard to say. I know, like with my 25 years experience, what they make now is not much compared to what it was before when they had no competition in town. There was no Hortons, there was no McDonald's, there was nothing like that. So it's certainly gone down their revenues.
Or we could defer this if you want for further discussion. Go ahead.
I think Councillor Wheeldon and I were discussing this motion as we were signing it. To me, there's a lot of maybe information that's missing. Not that we need them to open the books exactly to see exactly what they're doing, but to see exactly how the rental fees do affect their bottom line for both them and for Coal Creek. Would we suggest to them that they apply a grant for grants and aid as well, or under the Youth Initiative Fund? We have those kind of dollars. I think there's maybe some options there that I don't think supporting just cutting ice time fees at this stage would certainly be my first choice.
And although that is part of the letter, that was not in the prevailing email
That's right, and
conversation,
haven't
which
seen all of
I'm
those,
sorry,
right?
no,
So-
you all are not privy to right now. So how about Councillor Rowley is the mover that we say that council refer the request to staff for a report and discussion, and Jim, you and I and maybe Mr. McBride can have a sit down. Is that fair?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Does that work
And you
for
can
you?
share some of maybe what our concerns
Yeah,
are.
and I will forward I will share the email. I will share our concerns with them. I will provide council with the email that I am now referring to, and we can have a more fulsome discussion, hopefully on the 19th of June.
Yes, I will say in past years when this has come up, this is a subsidized rate compared to our prime rate. So I believe we are allowed to see what their books are. And we have increased the hourly rate this coming year from $107 to $110. That's the first increase in like 9 years.
Councillor Botwell.
Through the chair to Director Miller. It's my understanding that with rink rentals at the regular rink rate, that the municipality actually loses money regardless. So what were we at last year? $125 for an hour?
Well, again, it depends on the time you're renting. Our prime rate's 150.
So at $150 an hour with the complement of staff that we have and our energy costs of that building, does $150 an hour cover the cost of running that arena for an hour?
Well, again, that's not the hourly rate that you're charging everybody.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just thinking that we already subsidize the use for the entire community.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
and
we do.
that's why
We do.
municipalities run arenas, because
Exactly right.
if you could make money on an arena,
Private
everybody
sector
would
do it.
have it.
Yeah, I'm strictly making a point. Thank you.
Makes almost as much money as Memorial Park does. With the trees. So I've scratched receive or support. I've written in refer and to staff for a report at the end. Is that okay with the mover and seconder? Yeah. Is there any further discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. And request from the Girl Guides, moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council support the request from Devon Brady Thompson, Team Lead, Unit Space, Girl Guides of Canada to use the Hilton Hall for Brighton Sparks and Embers and Brighton Guides this upcoming fall. Is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Through the chair to, I believe, Director Whitfield. My question would be, does the municipality enter into a contract, an agreement with the organization that requires them to have their own liability insurance? And there's some sort of consideration of even $1 there to bind it?
Director Whitfield.
Through you, Mayor. No, there's no consideration of $1. Don't think that we've signed an official agreement, but we do receive their insurance certificate, naming the municipality Brighton on their policy.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further from members of council? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion is carried. Correspondence from Laura Wang requesting assistance for licensing and relocation of a food trailer is moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Councillor Fredis. The council received the correspondence from Laura Wang requesting assistance for licensing and relocation of food trailer mobile canteen. Is there any discussion? Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. This is not the first time we've seen correspondence about this. I'm wondering, is it appropriate at this meeting to get more information about how the RFP process went down?
I don't think it would be inappropriate. I just don't see the manager of economic development on the line. Do you have information you can help us with, CAO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do not for this evening, but certainly happy to follow up.
Do you want to defer this to a future meeting so we can have that information?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I've heard little bits and I've heard more from one side than from another.
Right.
And I'd like the official story before I can say anything of value about it.
You moving that deferral, Councillor Wheeldon? Yeah. Is there a seconder? It's moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that the correspondence be deferred to the June 19th meeting. Is there any discussion? Sorry, there's no discussion on a deferral motion. All those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. We will consider this correspondence at the meeting of June 19th. And correspondence from the Brighton Family Health Team, Lakeview Family Health Team with regard to nurse practitioner led clinic. It's moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Rowley. The council receive the Lakeview Family Health Team to fully participate in the provincial primary care reform initiatives and improve the care to the community with addition of 3 full-time nurse practitioners to complement the 1 full-time nurse practitioner and the expansion of the interdisciplinary health professionals such as registered nurses and social workers. Or is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Just a point of clarification, I believe. First, the nurse practitioner that's in place, I believe that they were a part-time nurse practitioner. Is she full-time?
I
I
believe
thought
she's
they
full-time.
were saying that the funding applying for this would bump up that part-time position to full-time and then increase by an additional 3.
I, is that what she said?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
That's just not what the presenter said.
Anyway.
And would I would actually like to support that versus receive it.
Well,
So,
right now,
I know,
right now it's received. So if we defeat the motion as it stands, we can revisit it to support it.
Understood.
Yeah, unless we can convince the mover and seconder to alter their motion. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. I would like to continue to receive the report. I'm concerned about the fact that this proposal will fully utilize the 2 pods that are left in the facility. And in very short order, I'm hopeful that we'll have our Health Services Advisory Committee up and running. And one of its priority focuses, based on its terms of reference, is to utilize that facility to provide access to blood testing and hopefully digital imaging and perhaps some other specialized services. And I would hate to see us make a premature decision that would lock us into a certain path and bar us from other options until we've had that advisory committee assess all those opportunities and then come back to council with something more fulsome with all of the options, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I would like to continue to simply receive the report. I do not see that it precludes the opportunity for them to apply for funds this year or next year. But I think in terms of the best interest of the municipality, we're best to simply receive and allow the Health Services Committee to do its work.
So while I would agree that it wouldn't preclude them from applying for the money, I think the chances of them getting it without municipal council support, especially given that we own the building, would be next to nothing. So we'd be cutting them off at the knees by not supporting this. Deputy Mayor?
More or less what I was going to say, that I think the whole purpose of coming here tonight was they need our support. You're and by the 16th of this month.
Yes.
And
so they need to apply
for
by
us
the
to
16th.
delay on it, I think would just would delay it for years. So I would say no, we need to move ahead with it. I have a question though. I didn't like if they take over those 2 offices, what does that, how does that affect us in the way of a rental? Or
We would have to negotiate a rental with the family health
but
team
as
for
long
those
as
2
it's
pods.
clear that would be something that would, as part of the support, we would.
Ms. Parker is well aware of the fact that
Okay,
ain't
I was-
nothing free.
Okay. So I'm the due diligence. Okay, I'm all in favor of getting them.
Councillor Wheeldon.
All right.
Thank you. I'm very much in agreement that it's the timing is unfortunate because it makes sense that, we're about to strike a committee to discuss this very thing. And we don't have time to do that before they would have to make a decision. So as much as I would love for the committee to be able to quarterback this kind of thing. If we don't have time, we don't have time. I don't know. I'm really torn. Well,
Hang on, we can debate this, but Councillor Wheeldon has the floor.
yeah. In principle, I love having nurse practitioners come to Brighton. I've been preaching it for 7 years. I want to see this happen. I want to see it with appropriate provincial funding. And I know that the grant process is brutal. So if we have the opportunity to get 4 medical practitioners to Brighton, just by saying yes tonight, if that increases those chances, I think it would be worthwhile to sort out where a lab could go at a later date. Is my thinking on it, if that makes sense.
Councillor Rowley.
And I'm of the same mind as far as I we have been talking nurse practitioners for years and years and years and have tried to encourage that. But I need to agree with Councillor Paredes. I think we need to get all groups to the table. There's a little bit wanting here. There's someone else having a plan here. We don't have a cohesive plan. And I think getting people at the table could probably, just bring more needs to the forefront. And I'm willing to wait to see what our new committee with experts on that have to bring to the table.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wright.
Having spent the day in a medical care system that went horribly, horribly wrong today, I can't help but think that having more practitioners can only be a good thing, that it would have probably mitigated what happened today. I know you and I had talked about it, and I would hate to see us potentially lose nurse practitioners if we're off by timing. I think rental space, and there was a little bug put in my ear, which we can chat about, but there is an idea for other space for blood work and x-ray. So I would be more in favor of supporting at this point after my experience today.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I know we've all been talking about the extra healthcare facilities, and but those two offices are designed for practitioners, or in this case, they're practitioners or physicians. So they were going to be put to use. They've been sitting there idle for so long, and it's a movement to move ahead. It's proactive. It's moving ahead. We're moving ahead with doctors. Now we could be moving ahead with nurse practitioners, and I believe there could be space, like you're saying, other space that will be could come available at some time for these other things that we need. But when you bring all that together and the population comes together, things can start happening, and that's what's happening here. So we've got the doctor thing happening. We may have this happening, and the next step is the next step. It's for that committee to push on that, and I think you'll find them pushing hard on that.
Thank you.
That's
Anything
my
further
opinion.
for members of council? I'm 100% supportive of bringing phlebotomy, life labs, whatever, to the community, diagnostics, specialists, etc. But this municipality invested $1 million in expanding that 170 Main Street location for the purposes of rostering patients, and this offers us that opportunity. I look forward to whatever the Health Services Advisory Committee offers this municipality, what advice they can bring to the table, and what next steps look like. But in the world of we have to strike when the iron's hot, in my opinion. And so we should, in my opinion, support the family health team in this endeavor. Go ahead, Councillor.
Well, clearly in my mind, blood work and digital imaging and those sort of testing services are equally as important here as some additional nurse practitioners. And again, if we give away all this space, where would the committee advocate putting those sort of facilities? I'm not aware of where that would be. I mean, the medical services facility offered a wonderful place to put it, unless there's the opportunity for the committee to say the Y has to move. I'm not sure that's necessarily a viable alternative, but you tend to box Brighton in terms of bringing that vital service here, I think.
I think rostering 3,400 patients should be our priority. Councillor Botwell.
Through the chair, I completely understand where you're coming from, and the need for diagnostic imaging and diagnostic services is pressing as well. But I would suggest that if 3,400 people do not have access to primary care, then there's no one prescribing that they need an X-ray. So the care has to come first before the diagnostic imaging. In this case, we have thousands of people in this community who don't have a primary care provider. I apparently do, but I still have not months and months later heard from them. So I'm kind of in that wasteland as well. But there are thousands of people who do not have a doctor or nurse practitioner and who can't access care. So it's, to me, not an equal need, close second, but not an equal need.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you, Chair. I would really love just the process of having the right committee in place to weigh in on this decision. But in terms of the two problems, the one problem being not having enough doctors or practitioners and not having enough space for them, I think one of those problems precedes the other. Right now, we don't have the space and we don't have anyone to put in them, or we've got the space, we don't have anyone to put in them. It would be better to have a problem of having to find space. I help people find space every day. I know that commercial space is not easy to find here, but it's not as hard to find as a doctor or nurse practitioner. It's an easier problem to solve and a better problem to have to solve, to have too many doctors and medical services for the space that we have. I think that's an easier problem. So I would supporting.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fredis.
Thank you. And while I understand the appeal of some nurse practitioners being able to roster up to 3,500 odd patients, I think we realistically have to recognize that that is a projected number based on potential growth of Brighton. It's not the here and now today. I don't think anybody can find that number on the list of folks without a practitioner today. So we need to recognize that the number is slightly skewed. The other thing I found interesting that although there's a different level of qualification based on the two medical bodies, the rostering is a different number for nurse practitioners versus physicians. And nurse practitioners seem to take on a higher rostering than physicians, based on what she cited.
If I may.
Yeah.
I heard her say the opposite, that nurse practitioners take on fewer patients than doctors. And in my experience with as a former nurse practitioner patient, it's because they spend more time with patients. And so they deliberately have that lower roster. And they also tend to be paid less than doctors. And so it evens out a little bit.
Just to follow up, that's not what I understood. And again, using the numbers that were cited, we're talking about, I think she said 3,000, 3,400, something like that, which is well over 1,000 per. And the practical number that she also indicated for a physician to give a reasonable level of care is 800. So one has to wonder about these numbers and the level of care that comes out of it.
So the numbers she gave were that 4 nurse practitioners would take on 3,400 patients. That's about, give or take, 800 to 900 per nurse practitioner. And that a physician would take on between 1,000 and 1,200 patients. So I was asking those questions to figure out what these two pods were valued at on a per patient basis. And so my assessment is providing the 2 pods to 4 nurse practitioners at 3,400 patients is better for the community than providing it to 2 physicians at 2,400 patients, because that's what these pods were designed for, taking on patients, not diagnostic imaging. So regardless, I think, regardless of what our Health Service Advisory Committee comes up with, we would have to find different space for imaging and laboratory work, because these, and I'm just me talking, this guy didn't invest $1 million so that Life Labs could make another 50 cents, right? We did that so that we could roster patients at this location. And this is the opportunity to do that, Deputy Mayor.
Diagnostics also require a license to practice, to set up in Brighton if they're going to do that. You don't just set up diagnostics. And this space again is 2 offices and by reception area, and it's shared reception area anyhow, isn't it, Bob? So it's diagnostics and the features that you and I've talked about will be a licensed operation that would come here that would need it set up just like a franchise in a way. And so I think their facilities are going to be somewhat different. You could look at that whole building someday if we ever had a place to welcome the Y to move to. And then we could look at that entire building as being a medical building. But that's, again, that's for planning, that's for strategic planning and that type of thing.
And we are not kicking the YMCA out.
No, we would.
We are not kicking.
We love
our
Y. And they're coming with us. But no, I'm just using it as an example anyhow. It's a building that we own that we can have some say on what's going to happen with it. But right now we have 2 offices sitting there for the last at least 4 years that I know of, and probably longer. So it's time to put them to work. So, and the point about the 3,000, it was clear. We don't know exactly how many are registered with Healthcare Connect. So they're not giving us those numbers. People that are here now that don't have a doctor. What we're talking about is the number of people that have moved here that are still driving to Windsor to see their doctor, that won't give up their doctor because they're afraid that they won't have a doctor when they do that. So the process now, I'm going to throw it out there, talk to your doctor there before you get, and then you can have a chance to talk to the doctors here.
I'll one better you, because tonight what we heard from Ms. Parker was you don't need to deroster from your doctor pick the community that's away to be rostered or to be seen by the nurse practitioner. They will roster you. They will automatically become your primary healthcare provider. And that will force you, I don't know if it forces you off the physician's roster, but it forces the dollars off of the physician's roster. So it's a better model of rostering, quite frankly. It provides options and opportunities for the patients here in Brighton. And that's really what got me on this one. It wasn't a matter of we're bringing a physician. We don't know if we have the patients. We'll cross our fingers and hope we know that we do.
Thank you.
But here's the opportunity for people who are rostered with a physician from away to get primary health care in Brighton. And that's I think that's what sort of excites me about this one. Councillor Rowley.
So over the last several years, we've had quite a number of orphan patients. We've added how many doctors to the area? 4, 5, maybe. Do we even know what number of folks here in the area? So do we need, are there 3,400 orphaned patients or residents in the area that require doctors? I'm still a bit skeptical about the whole Brighton Quinte idea, that I think we're going to be still watering some of that out as well. I don't think it's going to be as Brighton focused as Wendy seems to think. I'm still a bit skeptical about that. I think we're still going to be trading off space and people.
And that's entirely possible, because there's no, regardless of the title of the person that goes into that office or who that person is, they could very well roster a patient from outside of the KOK1HO area. It's a free country, it turns out, and not all doctors want to see all patients, right? So to answer your first question on who's how many orphan patients we have on the Healthcare Connect list. We don't get those numbers anymore. Ms. Mason at Docs by the Bay doesn't get those numbers anymore. She used to, but Healthcare Connect is being very elusive with those numbers, and we're not sure why.
Top secret.
But Ms. Mason believes that number is now very low in terms of the actual number of people who are without a doctor in the community. So this would simply be a matter of being able to offer primary care to those people who have come into the community, kept their doctor in, pick your city that way, and will allow them then to get primary care in the municipality, which I think is a goal we should be reaching for. Director Whitfield.
I thought I'd weigh in on the financial benefit of this proposal. We'll now get rent for that portion of the building that we haven't got rent for 4 years. So that will be revenue coming in, and you're not going to pay the amounts of money that you have to pay for a physician. So you're saving that. So that I see as your financial benefit.
Thank you. Exactly.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butwell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Director Whitfield actually covered my 2 points right there. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, thank you. I just wanted to remind everybody, because the numbers, I'm still having troubles with them. I hear about 4 practitioners handling 3,400 patients, but the letter that we all have clearly states 3 practitioners handling 3,400 patients. So it's up over 1,100, and it's not the lesser number that we were led to believe.
So there is an existing nurse practitioner that is not included in the letter. Any further discussion for members of council? Motion is to receive. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is to receive. I'll start again. Actually, you know what? Let's call a recorded vote, and then we're all clear on it.
So the motion is to receive. And the mayor has called the recorded vote. Mayor Brian Ostrander,
No.
Deputy Mayor Ron Anderson.
Sorry, to be
So it's to
clear.
receive, not to support.
I know, to be clear that we will have an opportunity.
There will be an opportunity to put another motion on the floor.
All right. No.
Councillor Ann Butwell,
No.
Councillor Byron Paredes,
Yes.
Councillor Emily Rowley,
Yes.
Councillor Jeff Wielden,
No.
Councillor Bobby Wright.
No.
Okay, so that's been defeated.
Thank you. And I presume that council will want a motion put on the floor. The council supports the Lakeview Family Health Team to fully participate in the provincial primary care reform initiatives and improve the care to the community with the addition of 3 full-time nurse practitioners to complement the 1 full-time nurse practitioner and the expansion of the interdisciplinary health professional, such as registered nurses and social workers. Is there a mover? Let's move by Deputy Mayor Anderson. Second. Councillor Wright. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion is carried. I just put council supports ... Thank you, everyone. I think we all appreciate all of the arguments that were let and why. We all get it. Taking us to FYI correspondence, it is moved by the first is the County of Northumberland resolution regarding proposed changes to the PPS. Moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council received the correspondence from the County of Northumberland regarding the resolution submission on the proposed changes to the provincial policy statement. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion's carried. Next is with regard to community care, thanking us for a grant and aid. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that council received a thank you letter from Community Care Northumberland for the grant and aid donation. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. And county updates, it's moved by Deputy Mayor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Butwell. The council received the Northumberland County updates May 29th to June 9th, 2023 as information. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to question period. Is there anyone in the gallery with a question with regard to tonight's agenda? And there's no one on Zoom except Director Whiteman, and I presume he doesn't have any questions. So before we go into closed session, we'll take a 10